Task order contracting. So if you do a services contract or if you do a multiple award schedule contract, there's going to be task orders that the government's going to release to you as they discover what their requirements are. So this is how how task order contracting works. So this is what this. Something about yeah. So anything that's an indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity contract, IDIQ, means that the government at the time of the solicitation did not have a good handle on what their requirements were. So it would be like, in your case, every once in a while you're going to need to put new products forward, and you're going to need some engineering to do that. But January 1st, you don't know what all that, how many hours of engineering you're going to need, how many products you're going to release this year. So you just get prices for different labor categories under engineering from vendors. And once you know what their prices are, their labor rates, then you can send a note out to them and say, this is the specific task that I need to have done. You tell me, based on your labor rates, your labor categories, which labor categories you would have work on this piece of this task order, and how many hours each of them would work, and what the total cost would be. So that's how you would respond to a task order request. So, so there are contracts for services that do not procure or specify a firm quantity of services, and that provide for the issuance of an order of performance task under a period of contract. So you put labor rate hours. The way you respond to this is you put your CLIN, contract line item number, so you just number everything you're offering. And then you say, here's a description of each of the labor categories we're going to use for this contract. And this is the price we're going to charge for each of those labor categories. And here's a description of each of those labor categories. And then here's the price for year 1 of the contract, here's the price for year 2, 3, 4, and 5, whatever the requirement is. So that's what you give to the government. The government will typically tell you in an RFP some minimum number of hours that they'll buy from you, and usually it's not a big number, and some maximum number. It's not really helpful information because it's going to be anywhere in between there. Delivery order contract is the same, except that it's being used for supplies rather than services. So, I'm going to buy 39 bottles of cleaning solution. That would come over to you as a delivery order. So the government, when they have to do some internal coordination to be able to send that requirements document to you. So they have to work with their technical team to figure out what the task order should look like. Are there any associated documents? So in the case of a task order, they would have to give you a description of the project they want you to work on. They have to reconcile so then once they send that to you, you send back a task order proposal, and they do a quick check to verify that all the labor categories you put and the prices, they go back and look at the contract and verify that you're using the same labor categories and the same rates for the correct year. Just like we talked about, that you have to be using things that are on the contract baseline. So it applies to you, it applies to them. They can only order this. And they have to understand, make recommendation whether they should do a single versus multiple award. So within the task order, within an IDIQ contract that already has multiple companies bidding, they decide on an individual task order basis whether it should be awarded to just one company or multiple companies. So let's say, for example, they want the same exact service in San Diego and Norfolk. They could decide to award it to one company who can handle both, so that there's a lot of consistency between the way the work's being done. Or they could decide that all of our vendors only operate in certain geographical locations. So I'm going to give one company the Norfolk one, and I'm going to give the San Diego to another. So they have to decide how they're going to split it up. And then they also make recommendations regarding the ordering officers and task monitors duty. So how is the person going to actually submit the order to contractors? They have to figure that out. And then once the contract is awarded, the task order is awarded, how are they going to monitor progress? How are they going to monitor what you're doing? So they put together the task order statement of work. They are supposed to go off and figure out themselves, based on the prices available on the contract, how much this is going to cost. So before they ever get your proposals in for this task order work, they should have said, oh, I think it'll take, 5 systems engineer level 1 hours and 10 system engineer level 2 hours, whatever the breakup is, and then multiply that times your numbers, so that when your proposals come in, they should be able to do a point-by-point comparison to see where you're off or they're off. So in some cases, you may not understand, they may have not written the requirement well enough that you understand what's being asked for, in which case you would need to revise your numbers. Or it may be that there are things that they didn't realize had to be done in order to get this work done, that you know because you've been doing this all the time, in which case they would modify their independent government estimate and accept your proposal. So then they determine whether funding is available. Once they do that reconciliation, they evaluate your task plan, in other words, what milestones have you identified for getting this task order work done, and then they monitor your performance against that task order to make sure that all the work is being done according to specification. And that can be one person or multiple persons, depending on how big the task order is. If the task order is located in different areas, you're going to have different task order managers. They want to make sure they avoid personal services contracting. What that means is there can't, okay, so let's say I'm the government monitor, or I'm one of the government officials, and you're doing your work. And I say, Don, I don't like the way you're doing that. I think you should be doing it this way. That goes into personal services. I am personally acting like Don's manager and telling him how to do the work better. As a government official, I can't do personal services. What I have to do instead is go to company XYZ, who Don works for, contact the contracting officer and say, I have a problem with the way Don's performing the work. They need to talk to Don and get it straightened out. Or maybe Don doesn't have the expertise, maybe they bring in somebody else to replace Don, but it's their issue to solve, right? Not me.
I don't have the expertise, I'm crushed. Just sit here right now.
Just for example. Yeah. So that's personal services, and maybe government officials can't do that. They have to always go to the actual prime contractor. They have to make sure that the work proposed in the task order falls squarely within the scope of the contract. So one of the issues the government has to make sure they don't violate is, if this is the scope of the contract, I can't issue a task order for something over here, right? So if I tell you that this is for the Department of Navy in San Diego, I can't give you, that's what the main contract's for, I can't give you a task order to take care of the Army base at Fort Belvoir. Right? That would be outside the scope. Ensure that direct supervision of the contractor personnel by government personnel does not transform the contract into a non-personal services contract, from a non-personal services contract with personnel to a personal services contract. The example I just used. Ensure the direct labor hours, cost, and time proposed is consistent with the statement of work. So you want to make sure that you're using the correct. So one thing companies will do is they'll say, here's my high-priced systems engineer 3, and here's my medium-priced systems engineer 2, and here's my brand spanking new, can barely spell systems engineer level 1, right? And so they might try to say, to win the work, they might say, I'm going to use 100 hours of systems engineering 1. So the government would look at that and say, wait a minute, who's managing this? This person, barely got out of college, and we need somebody more, more expert to be able to figure that out. As the aghast showed by Judy's face. These rules seem silly, but then some contractor did this, otherwise they wouldn't have the rule, right? And it was more than one. IDIQ contracts will usually be awarded to multiple contractors, so that's the whole reason why they have IDIQ, because if they come up with 3 requirements right away, you as a small business may not be able to do all 3. So you reserve the right to not bid on task orders within this IDIQ, but then other companies that have been selected can bid on them. They require significantly more administrative effort than single task order. If I only have one contractor as a contracting officer, I set them up in the system, and then every day I just issue delivery orders or task orders, and I just have them to manage. I have one point of contact. You know, it becomes a very simple process. You start talking about multiple award, everything has to go out for competition. Every one of them has to be evaluated. Every one of them has to spotlights in your eye when they're evaluated. And I have to set up all 5 of you in the system. I have to make sure that if there are any problems, you know, if I need to take work away from one and get it done, it becomes a lot more cumbersome. The CO has to draft selection criteria, so that whole evaluation process we talked about before. They have to do the same thing for a multiple award solicitation. And you have to avoid methods such as allocation that will not result in fair consideration being given to every awardee. So let's say I have 5. I can't say, okay, the first one goes to you, and the second one goes to you, and the third one goes to you. And the reason why I can't do that is because this first one may have only been worth $10,000, and the next one's worth $100,000. So I have to give all 5 of my companies the opportunity to bid on every one of them to keep it fair and equal to everybody. Contracts, order and procedures must expressly state that the government need not contract every awardee prior to placing an order. So, need not contact every awardee. So they can automatically send out, so typically they have it set up so they press a button and the solicitation document goes to all 5. They don't have to do any more contact with the person, with the company. The company decides to either meet the requirement due date or not meet the requirement due date, but they don't have to do any further discussion. Like, they don't have to call you up and say, hey, just so you know, there's a RFP that's in your inbox. It's up to you to do that. They must make multiple award if a contract is for advisory or assistance service, would exceed 3 years and cost more than $10 million. So this is where they actually have to go to multiple award under that scenario. Single award is made when it's in the best interest of the government. Under these scenarios, if there's only one contractor who's capable of providing performance and the level of quality required, they can go with just one company. If market research indicates the government will get more favorable terms and conditions if they buy all from one company. So keep this in mind. Like, maybe your average bill rate is $150 an hour, and you say to the government, if you do a single award and I get the award, I'll lower this to $100 an hour. And then the government looks at, well, she's charging $150, and these other companies are at $125, $119, but she'll take it down to $100 if she does the whole thing. When they do market research and they discover that, they could decide to go with a single award. The cost of administering these multiple contracts would probably outweigh any potential benefits. Okay, so the government, in their pipe dream, believes that to manage a single contractor through the life of the contract, no matter how long the contract is, no matter what a pain in the neck the contractor is, no matter how new the contractor is, no matter, it costs them $500. So when they're evaluating how to procure something, the Excel filler to equalize things and to make an apples-to-apples comparison is $500. So if they're going to award to one contractor, they only need to add $500 to their total procurement costs, because in their head, it only takes them $500. I can't even imagine under what drug-induced scheme they would think it only costs $500 to manage a contractor, but that's what it is. But if they're going to manage 5 of you, it's going to be a $2,500 hit to the contract that gets taken away from their actual program dollars. So that's why that comes in. Probable tasks are so integrally related that only one contractor can reasonably perform the work. So if I'm doing the same thing in Norfolk as I am in San Diego, and the government cares about standardization, which they usually do, the government would be more likely to award both of those pieces of work to one contractor, just because it provides that standardization. Estimated value of the contract is less than the simplified acquisition threshold. So if we're talking really low dollar amounts, they can avoid this whole task order thing and just go straight with simplified acquisitions. And then for single awards, a requirements contract is used. So here's the work. They typically don't do performance-based. It's IDIQ. So these are the people on the government side that take care of task orders. They may assign a COR, unless it's a really small agency and the contracting officer can do the work, usually they bring in a COR. The ordering officers usually deal with multiple program office personnel and individual statements of work developed by the program. So basically what we're saying here is that the Corps typically does not write up the task order requirement. Typically it comes from the technical team to the Corps for release to all the companies. The CO should delegate the ordering authority only to individuals who have proper training and the ability to carry out. So keep in mind, the government wants to ensure that when it spends contract dollars, that it's doing it in a fair and equitable manner and that they're protecting taxpayer dollars. So all the people we've talked about so far, the Corps, the CO, they've been thoroughly trained in how to do their job, so program managers. But when you start getting down to this next level, you're dealing with like the next level of people in the organization. They're not required to have task order or CO training or COR training. But what this is saying is that the CO should pick the people. So they would pick the guy that we had in class yesterday, right? Because he had been a COR before he had been a CO. He would be a good task order manager. But somebody who's had no experience with anything contracting would not be a good one. Because even though they don't have to be certified, you want to make sure they have that training. More likely to delegate when there's a fixed price for the task rather than on task orders establishing labor rates and material costs. So in order to get this task order proposal set up, you typically give them the labor rates. At that point, they just have to verify that your rates are okay. But if they actually say, okay, here is a piece of work that you need to perform, give us your proposal on this, they need to verify, they need to have a lot of controls in place to make sure all your costs are allowable. They have to verify you're doing the work and all that other stuff, because now you've actually got a piece of work. When you have labor rates, you just have labor rates on the contract. You're not required to do anything. CO may appoint task monitors to monitor situations involving significant task orders, either high cost or complex. So task orders can be something like, okay, you need to man a help desk for 8 hours a day from now until September 30th. Real simple. Or it can be highly integrated. You need to develop a prototype for a new intel gathering device that we're going to use. So it can be all over the map in terms of complexity. Okay, any questions about task orders? Okay. You guys are very chatty today. Am I talking too much? Oh, do you want to talk a little bit about what were you going to talk about?
Well,
Oh, yeah.
I don't know a lot about it. It's a new procurement, it's a new tool the government is using to accept prototypes from contractors. It's called Other Transactional Authority, and I think they've only been using it for about a year. It allows the government not to go to the procurement process if someone has a very unique prototype or something in research that they have developed, and they can just buy they can pay the contractor to develop that prototype for them. Go to them directly without going through the process of the evaluation and all those other things. So, if you wanted to look up more about it, if you just put in Google, in quotes, Other Transactional Authority, you'll see how it works. It's just an idea. And the contractor who developed and he has a patent on it, of course, he developed a gas tank to go on the truck.